I'm so glad to have you all here. I'm Amanda Lyons. I'm the Executive Director of the Human Rights Center here at the Law School. And this is really a special conversation that we pulled together in the middle of our Human Rights Center Day. Since the class of 1978 is celebrating their anniversary this year and a lot of people are back on campus, we wanted to take the occasion and opportunity to celebrate a special fellowship that the class of 1978 has started. I'm a past fellow from our Human Rights Center Fellowship Program, so I always find it really special to hear about and talk about the impact that this program has on our students' lives, because in a testament to that, my fellowship experience was really transformative for me. I worked for a previous fellow, so I feel like I was kind of a generation of fellows that have been impacted by the program and care really deeply about this program. I'll just say a few words about the center and the program, and then I'm going to turn it over to Judge Lang, member of the class of 1978, and really one of the founders with Kathy Borland of this special program. When I was thinking about the program, and thinking about it through the lens of thinking about David Weisbrot, David started the investment in internships for students and professionals even before the center was founded. And so back in the early 80s, Professor Weisbrot was already out looking for resources to help make it possible for really smart, really bright, really committed students and professionals to have the chance to go and do human rights and public interest work. He had started, in addition to the Human Rights Center and all the other organizations that we know he was committed to building up, he had another organization that we talk about less that was called the International Human Rights Internship Program. And that is still the organization through which we're recognized in the UN. So he kind of created that space for students to be engaging with the UN long before the center even started. And when we were looking back through some of the historical documents, the files that were physically in the center, and there's meeting notes, David kept everything very meticulous. And the impetus of even starting this program was to make human rights work accessible to every kind of student and professional that was interested in it. And not only the type of student that had either married well or was relying on their parents. David had the vision to see that this type of investment in students is what made career in human rights and human rights work accessible to anybody that was interested. So we feel really committed to that mission still today. Of course, now it's more common that law schools have financial support for their law students, but when the program was started, that was absolutely not the case. Maybe a final note from me on that is that at the Human Rights Center, we take a very broad understanding of what we mean by human rights. That means internationally, of course, doing work globally, doing work abroad, but also, since the beginning of the center, commitment to human rights in Minnesota and in the United States, so that's definitely included. And also for students on a lot of different tracks, so not just students that are interested in a human rights career, but students that will go on to a lot of different types of professional roles, to have them committed and trained in human rights work, whether they're inside a corporation or as a public servant, doing direct representation. So we kind of, in that spirit that David started, really kind of attract students that are really talented and committed, regardless of what path they're looking for, and try to give them that exposure and training. And the George Ludcke Fellowship and the Class of 1978 Fellowship has been a really important part of this fellowship program since 2008, when it was founded. I came back to the center in 2016, so this is going to be the 8th year that I'm working with the George Ludcke Fellows, and it's always really special to tell the students not only that they are not working entirely for free for the summer, which is always fun, but also to let them know that their work is in honor of a really beloved member of our legal community, a really beloved member of the alumni community, and that the financial support really represents the commitment of law school alumni in the new generations of students in their training. Each year we advertise the fellowship, and although it's open, it's especially for students that are interested in working with the rights and well-being of children, on environmental justice, and on disability rights. So we understand that those were issues that were really close to George's heart, and that he was a really dedicated volunteer working in those areas with the Children's Law Center and the Sierra Club. So we honor that those priorities that George manifested in his career with the students that we recruit. And I'll say, in preparation with this event, and Christy, I'm going to point you out, sorry, you just walked in the door, but I think Christy and Patrick and the people who have stewarded the fellowship program for a long time have been really good about staying connected with the people who started the fellowships. And so we've talked to George's sister and wife, and I don't know if is Isabel here? Isabel, okay, I should have looked before. We're so lucky that George's daughter Isabel was able to join us. So we're glad to have you here as we honor your father and everything that's been made possible in his name. So with that, the idea of this space is really that we can hear from our panelists and then have a conversation and take questions and comments. We have past fellows also that have joined us and other class members, so there should be plenty of time for us to do that. But first I'll turn it over to Judge Lane, who many of you just heard from in our past session. In addition to the bio that was presented there, Judge Lane has been a partner in Human Rights Center work in a lot of different phases of work, a lot of racial justice work, but also domestic rights issues here, access to justice, fair elections, long-standing partner in crime with Professor Weisbrod, and a leader of this fellowship. So it's really a privilege to get to hear from you about George and your class and this fellowship. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I want to say hello to Isabel, and we could not have started this fellowship and this fund without your mother's support. And so please tell her we're so happy that this is alive, continuing in George's memory. And the other key person to make this happen is classmate Kathy Gorlin, who couldn't join us today, but sends her greetings to everyone and encourages everyone to support this fellowship. And so we started as a class in 1978. We ended up, as the university does, you get assigned sections when you all have common classes. So Kathy, George, and I were mostly in same classes throughout law school. So we got to know each other. George also joined the public defender's office, which I did. So we continued after graduation to see each other, and Kathy went into private practice. George ended up going to the same law firm as Kathy Gorlin. So we had that kind of circle of friendship. And so we ended up, after George passed away, to say, how can we acknowledge his memory? How can we acknowledge his compassion for social justice? Because one of the other things that George did was he was kind of the campfire guy. If you would give him 5 minutes, he would tell you some really interesting thing that was going on or that he was doing. And one of those things is working at Camp Courage. So he talked about Camp Courage, he talked about all these different, being a roadie for rock groups and all these different things that he was involved in, so that you saw that he was just a complete human being in love with the world and in love with people. It wasn't, just his aspiration to make money. He was a people person. And so George worked at the public defender's office and eventually left the public defender's office and went into private practice. And he had a successful career as a private lawyer, but he suddenly passed away. And we wanted to honor his memory by allowing students to have this transformative experience of working in the human rights field and giving them financial assistance to encourage it. Because as you know, many, many, many human rights cases are sustained by lawyers in the private firms whose firms give them permission to do pro bono representation. So we've had people in law firms work on death penalty cases for like 5 or 6 years with the permission and support of their firm. And we wanted to be able to move that experience down to the student level and provide some support for students to look more in depth at human rights. And so David Weisbrot was he was a mentor for George. He was a supporter and believer in human rights, and we felt the Human Rights Center was the place that this should be housed. And so I have to give Kathy Gorland the full credit for organizing financially and getting the initial funds raised, and all the members of the class and supporters who continue to sustain the fund. But it has been something that has really produced great results in terms of the students and individuals who've gone through the program. They write a report and talk about their experiences. They're available to meet at the law school or meet other groups. They have traveled through this program around the world to various places that may have been considered inaccessible were it not for the fellowship. And so they've touched the lives of many people. They've created transformative conversations with human rights leaders in Kenya and in other parts of the world, Rwanda, other places. So it has been a really beneficial fellowship.
Great. And we can keep chatting about it. I'll just add, we've had 22 Ludcke class of 1978 fellows so far. They've all worked at different organizations in different places, a really wide range. And we understand the benefit in three different ways. The student themselves gets this really exceptional professional training opportunity to get thrown into the deep end in public interest and human rights work. The organization really benefits by having full-time free labor by a very smart, ambitious law student. And then the center and the law school, we really benefit. We've kept lasting relationships with the organizations where our students have been placed. And that turns into kind of our network of ongoing research and advocacy. And one example is a student who, this is the problem of trying to do events with practicing lawyers, right? Just like our last event, who she's also in her hearing. She's at Sarah Halama, she's at the Hennepin Public Defender's Office right now, so I thought that was a lovely connection. She was one of our 2020 Ludcke fellows and had worked in the area of domestic violence and is now at the Public Defender's Office. So we do kind of Big Brother style. We track our fellows where they go and their big accomplishments. And for me, it's really a great honor and a privilege to get to welcome one of our fellows, Rebecca Roosevelt, who's a 2019 graduate and a 2017 Ludcke fellow. And I don't know where you'd be more comfortable, standing to talk to us, or you want to speak from where you're sitting? Whatever. I can stay right here. You choose. And I'll just say, Rebecca really, like a lot of our students do, but Rebecca really took full advantage of her summer and it didn't let it end and continued to work with the organization going forward for quite a while. We invited Rebecca here to kind of speak about her experience, and then we'll hear from a couple of the students, and then we can open it up for questions and more comments that people may have. So over to you, Rebecca.
Great, thank you for the lovely introduction. Really happy to be here and chatting with everybody here. So my first year of law school, like many others, I had no idea where I was quite going in the human rights world. And when I eventually interviewed with an organization called Juvenile Justice Advocates International, which is based out of Mexico, but the founder of the organization lives here in Minnesota, I was really excited to have that opportunity to go down and work juvenile pretrial detention with kids who were in the prison system in the northernmost state of Mexico, in Chihuahua State. And going down there, of course, is not, an easy thing to do out of pocket. And having the Ludcke Fellowship was absolutely instrumental in my being able to go and thrive and actually make this happen for a few months. And have the ability to go back and forth from office to the place I was staying to the prison. I got to actually, know the actual route and tell my Uber driver, though, actually, that's the better road to go to the prison, which was a wild thing coming from the white woman in the car. I had an amazing opportunity to work with kids who were in prison both pre-trial and after being sentenced, and they had gone through a whole wide variety of circumstances. Some of them were victims of gang recruitment, some gang violence, others were caught up in the type of domestic violence that can catch anybody in any country. And so it was interesting to see the population through the lens of the crimes committed by this group of kids. And I will say that the number of kids imprisoned in Mexico is much, much smaller than the population of kids imprisoned here in the northernmost state of Mexico, which is the size of like Texas maybe. There were a total of maybe 100 kids in detention. And I interviewed about 75 of them. It was also a really great way to learn local slang in another language. It was one of the most powerful things about the fellowship was learning the power of a small organization and what they can do internationally. This organization had 3 full-time employees while I was there. They now have about 7, but so small but mighty. And so at the end of my fellowship, I ended up continuing to do research. Selfishly, not just for the fellowship, but also for my journal note, which went really well and it got published in the end. But as part of that research, I co-wrote a report with Juvenile Justice Advocates, JJI, and that it was self-published, and we actually took that information to present at 2 UN committees in a May-June session in Geneva. So we presented our findings on different juvenile pretrial detention laws I think we ultimately found laws or lack thereof in 120 countries, which is a lot of languages as well, in a lot of languages. And we presented that information before the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child and the Committee Against Torture. So that's 2 very diverse areas of research that came from just this tiny little organization. And we had folks from around the world saying, well, in our country, yes, you got our law right, but did you also know this? And so it was a really cool experience to be able to interact with human rights professionals from around the world and really kind of join I don't want to call the international human rights advocacy community a community in itself, because it's 5,000 different communities at least. But it was very much the first step towards joining that world and being comfortable doing that in a way that I never would have dreamed possible when I first started law school. And I think it was truly set my career on a path of being comfortable going to another country and interviewing people in another language, and stepping out of a comfort zone that I didn't know the extent of, and being confident enough to present research I had, just become an expert in over the course of a year. Also, almost most importantly, is that it was a really great way to learn how to do non-litigation legal work. Law school really pushes a litigation focus, and this was an excellent opportunity to see the power and experience the day-to-day kind of work that entails non-litigation legal advocacy.
Thanks, Rebecca. And it's a great example of when we have a law student go and do really amazing, useful work, the organization then won't let them go and tries to find ways to keep them kind of working and connected. So I think it's a great example. And the report is really, really impressive, and it's sitting up on the Human Rights Center counter upstairs if anybody wants to see it. So it's a great example. Maybe we'll go next to Christian. So Christian Purnell is a 2L with us. Hey, Doug. And was just recently selected as our 2023 Ludcke Fellow. We'll most likely have 2 this year, but we're really excited that Christian was in our early applicant pool. Christian is a staff member on the Minnesota Journal of Law and Inequality and has volunteered with the Binger Center. And we're really excited as part of the class of 1978 George Ludcke Fellowship to be able to support his work with the Metropolitan Public Defender's Office in their Parent-Child Advocacy Division in Portland. So I'm really excited to get to introduce Christian to you all and hear about his plans for the summer.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's a pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to work this summer. It's something that I'm really interested in. First of all, your note sounds really cool. My note is currently going much worse than that, but I'm plugging away at it. But yeah, I've actually, this is my second time having with a fellowship that served as being a formative experience. I haven't done the work yet for this fellowship, but I have a feeling it's going to be similar. My first fellowship was back in undergrad when I was pretty sure, I'm from Portland, Oregon. Nike is everything in Portland, so for a while I was pretty sure that I was going to design sneakers until I started drawing, and it was not going to be the path for me, and I'm really happy about that actually. But at the time, a fellowship popped up at Carleton College, where I was going to school a little bit south of here in cities. And I took a chance, and I ended up with Professors Ben Casper and Lance Chan down the hallway for one summer, and then I begged Ben to come back for another summer. It was super, super formative. I worked in detainee rights in the immigration context, and for a kid like me that I grew up in a well-off part of Portland where I had never seen, I kid you not, I think you could go a year in my neighborhood without seeing a police officer. You could go your whole life, certainly, without going into encountering the justice system in any meaningful way. So I had no idea what I was getting into with Ben and Linus. I over-embellished my Spanish skills, and which came to bite me a little bit. But they forgave me, and they took me back for another summer. But that first year, I think I just followed them around. You said that the 3 prongs that are good is, that we get something out of it and the employer gets something out of it. Ben and Linus got absolutely nothing out of having me there for the summers. I mean, I was 20 years old, but it was really fun, and really I got to just follow them around, and it was super eye-opening, and also extremely tragic as well to see to be exposed to literally the inside of the prison industrial complex. It was in the immigration system, but for someone like me, I mean, it was like a super big shock to the system. And I didn't forget it. I did take a slight detour into antitrust work, but from that point on, I was pretty certain that I wanted to be a public defender one day. So when I decided to come back to law school, this was top of my list. And from day one, I kept kind of going down that path. I ended up at the Wisconsin State Public Defenders last year. It was just a really enjoyable experience, such a great office. I was in Eau Claire, and I just got to work with clients all day, spend my time with people. And I work in a child advocacy clinic upstairs, which is the first time that I started interacting with the juvenile system, which has a whole host. I mean, it's less due process, same types of punishments, and they're kids. Fundamentally, they're kids. I loved working with kids back in the day when I was in high school, teaching tennis and working with them in the classroom. And I see the same kids here, except they're going through this process that would be traumatic for an adult, 3 or 4 times their age. And so kind of working to shepherd them through has been an extremely rewarding experience this past year. And that's what I'm going to do in Portland, my home city. And I'm hoping to learn a lot this summer in the Child Advocacy Division. We do the same kind of work, juvenile defense. Oregon incarcerates some of the top amount of kids in the country right now. So it's a super pressing issue that I hope to address. But more importantly, I hope to kind of acquire some skills and then come back next year and hopefully work in either Hennepin or Ramsey County and just keep doing public defense forever. Yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you again for the funding. It's going to be an awesome opportunity this summer. And Portland's also not cheap to live in right now. It's become very hip. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Christian. That's really, really great. And I think there'll be questions about the work that you're planning to do. And I'll just say what we see with our students is a lot of these posts in public interest and in human rights are really competitive. So we have students that are competing against a lot of other candidates to get these these positions to go work their butts off for zero pay. And so it's a really interesting dynamic, but it's great to be able to make those opportunities possible. Now, I didn't give Sam any warning on this. Really, I'm wondering if Sam, if I could put you on the spot, another past Ludcke fellow that we have in the room. Do you want to just really briefly introduce yourself and say what you did with your fellowship? Do you mind?
Yeah, sure. It won't be as eloquent as happened, but I'm Sam Marquardt. I graduated in 2022, so kind of weird to be back here in this classroom. I interned at Disability Rights Wisconsin as a 2L. Super awesome time. I ended up after that going to the ACLU, and now I'm clerking, but hoping to do kind of more human rights stuff in the future in my next position. So.
It's great. And Sam, we have always, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 students every year with a really strong interest in disability rights. So we have several really great disability rights organizations that have benefited from the fellowship. And I'll do another rude thing. Somebody that I also didn't give any warning to and missed the first half, so you don't even get to hear what Rebecca said. Doug, can I introduce you? Dude, you can pass, but I'm not really giving you much of a chance. But we're really fortunate. Doug's another person. There's kind of people who are Minnesota adjacent in their legal education. We just kind of grab them as part of the Minnesota community. But now Doug's actually back in Minnesota, and Doug is actually the executive director, the founder of Juvenile Justice Advocates, where Rebecca works. And so maybe just as a host organization, you don't have to say anything. It's so great just to introduce yourself to the group.
No. So I'm going to stand up. Yeah, I'm sorry I was late.
No.
I'm sorry I missed. But Rebecca worked for us for much longer than her summer internship period and did an incredible note on the work that she did for us. And so we are a small organization. Actually, this is our 10-year anniversary this year. I think when Rebecca was working for us, we've been around for maybe 5 years. And our organization works on alternatives to incarceration for juveniles in Latin America. And it's work that is not, there's not a lot of other organizations like ours. I think it's a unique opportunity, the fact that we're kind of Minnesota and Mexico City based. And to be honest, having Rebecca be able to come in and work with our team in Mexico. She spent the summer in Ciudad Juarez in Chihuahua, which, it wasn't quite as competitive as maybe some of the other postings, but also for an organization like us that maybe isn't one of the banner, ACLU, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, that maybe people haven't heard of our organization before. We really need people like Rebecca to come and work with us and help us build up our portfolio of work. The work that she did for her note also was fundamental to a global study that we put together. Did you tell me what the parents? Okay. So we were able to present it for the United Nations, and a unique experience because we're a small organization that students can come, and when we have those opportunities, they have to find the funding, but they can come with us when we present to the United Nations in Geneva or the Congress on Justice with Children in Paris, or we're going to have some more things I need to talk to Amanda about that's coming up. But for us, it was hugely fundamental for our organization. It's still a report and research that we continually point back to. Other law schools are using it. Other law clinics are using the report that Rebecca really shepherded. She got other law students at the law school to volunteer their time over Christmas break. Did you tell them all this?
I didn't tell them about the cohorts thing.
Okay. So anyway, it was pretty incredible to have her on our team and to have her be able to be supported in that way through those different phases, whether it was the summer internship or the travel abroad or those things. So I'm just overwhelmed with seeing her and being so excited, and I'm going to let the staff in Mexico know that I'm on with Rebecca today, and I'm going to be jealous. So anyway, that's I don't know if there's anything else that I can just share.
That's beautiful, thank you. I really appreciate it. And yeah, and with Rebecca just flew in from DC yesterday to be able to join us, so it is really special to have her back. So I think that's really just a glimpse of the fellowship program. I think all the different layers of meaning and impact that the class of 1978 has been able to do in George's memory. For the Human Rights Center, I know I speak on behalf of Professor Niederlein, also as faculty director of the Human Rights Center. It's a real privilege and an honor for us to be able to steward this fellowship at the center. It's really core to the mission of what the center is trying to do. The center is different than other academic research institutes and centers in the sense that it was founded with a very clear, dedicated teaching mission. So it's not only committed to the research and policy work, but investing in the training of students. So it's only because of the fellowship that we're able to, I think, make these opportunities possible. So we definitely have time for some comments and reactions. Maybe I'll just ask Judge Lang if there's anything else you want to add, or before we kind of see if there's questions or comments from others.
I think we should go to the questions and then, anybody have a
question or a comment or a reaction? Love to hear from anyone. Yeah, please.
I didn't get what years were you in Mexico?
I was there in the summer of 2017, and then we did our presentations before the UN in 2018.
And how do I get a copy of those notes?
I'm happy to email them to you. Otherwise, I don't know if you have the URL right off the top of your head.
I literally in my car, I have like the little QR codes from the.
We really have some up on the center on that kind of information stage, a really great kind of handout where you could get it, so we can definitely get you a copy.
Here. It's in our library, on our website.
Yeah, Todd,
I didn't really know what this conversation was going to be about, but coincidentally, I was in Israel, or more specifically Jerusalem, just a couple of weeks ago, where I was able to go in and what's called military court law. It's really a euphemism for military hearings, occupationally. But, and coincidentally, I was able to observe a hearing for a 16-year-old juvenile. And that was horrendous. There's no other way to describe it. Happened to meet the mother beforehand of the child, and she was describing how he'd been arrested for throwing stones, but not in an ordinary arrest sense, but rather with a night raid, which is a practice of the Israeli Defense Forces. So I guess I'm wondering, is any thought given to your organization perhaps expanding its project to Jerusalem? Because Jerusalem, Israel, has such a disproportionate influence on the United States policing, as I'm sure everybody here knows, with the training that goes on. Police forces here.
Yeah, you touched on two really interesting issues specifically. So one of our partner organizations that's much larger than us. It's called Defense for Children International. They have a very strong office in Palestine, and they've been raided they've been identified as a terrorist group in Israel and raided. They've been raided twice and had their office attempted to be shut down. So they're doing really great work on the ground. We also are, and this is something I actually do have something for here. We are just starting a network of organizations that are specifically looking at how U.S. police and criminal justice practices are spread throughout the world, either directly through U.S. government funding or through osmosis of, well, that's how America does it, so that's how we should do it. So we're calling it export of justice on prisons with other partner organizations. Us specifically, our expertise has been developed in Latin America, and which is kind of ground zero. Actually, Israel is a great example, but actually, the country that receives the most U.S. aid, U.S. international assistance for police and prisons, after Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 15 years, now we're talking about. After Iraq and Afghanistan is Mexico. And the fourth place country isn't even close. So we feel like we are kind of in ground zero too for a lot of what's happening in those realms. But I'll get the pitch now from Amanda. This is the kind of work that we need to have partners to be able to expand our reach and expand and thinking about the UN, the new UN mechanisms and those pieces. It's, we saw the George Floyd protests spread across the world, but thinking about the flip side of that is, there's thousands of corrections officials coming to Colorado every year from all around the world to learn how they should do it, So we are trying to, that's how we're punching kind of above our weight, I guess you'd say. But you get it, what's going on in Israel and Palestinian juveniles is atrocious. It's atrocious and terrible, and anything that we can do to raise the issues and support the work that's going on there, I think is important. I'm very much cool to see it.
I think one piece of the work from what I know about it that's also helpful to think about is, and it's something I think we'll talk about later in the day in our events too, is the link between public interest work and what we think about as public interest and human rights. and how through networks and people operating in different places, working for change, there can be these partnerships between what we think of as maybe very bread and butter direct representation. So you think about maybe kids or lawyers that are on the ground working on specific cases, and how they can inform policy advocacy that would benefit their practice, but how advocates need to know the information that public interest lawyers are facing. And so we see a lot of examples of how the way that these different spaces interact and what they mean. So that's great. I know, was there another question?
Yeah. Rebecca, you have spoken about going to Mexico and doing a sample interview where it was about 3/4 was your personal estimation of those that you interviewed. And when you're taking it in light of how you talk about when you went to Geneva and the 120 countries with the laws that accompany that while you're in Mexico, my question as an activist is when I go forward to ask which laws to representatives or make petitions if people were not a constituent, but I'll write a letter and say, do this for your people. What do you feel or what did you experience when you looked at these children's rights compared to the parent right? Was it that the parent right was superseding the child's right and that's why maybe there wasn't any of these laws that you saw? Citing over the expanse, the rule of 120 countries.
Sure, so I wouldn't say that there were the counterpart to a child's right is a parent's right, but rather the right of an adult or just a general right within the criminal code to have a trial within X number of days of one's incarceration. The idea being that children should be held for less amount of time than an adult should be held, not that an adult should be held indefinitely. So I would say it was more of a comparison of laws that specifically address children compared to laws that address the entire population, compared to countries that didn't have laws that addressed it at all. And that takes an extra level of surety to confirm the absence of a law. So there was I would say that in researching those laws, those were the three things balanced, and then in addition to that, we didn't have the ability to look at practice for each of those countries, but only the actual law. So we know that the practice going on for most countries is very, very different. So I would hesitate to recommend any one approach.
Okay. And I just want to affirm that because as an activist for human rights, a lot of times when you're saying is there a law or not a law, that's where that gray area allows the violation of human rights. At least that's what I perceive when I look at codified law or try to understand which bill I'm going to ask for to help out a child, adult, or someone that's had their rights violated. Thank you. I had a question. May I ask a second question? Okay. The other question I had was for Christian.
Yeah.
Christian, you had mentioned of how your upbringing changed your viewpoint. And when we go to work, our personal experience can either, it's my opinion, can either create a passion or make us dispassionate about something. You said that you lived in a socioeconomic status where you could walk down the street and be like, oh, no, I can't. As opposed to, did you ever feel or perceive that there was more of an intelligent crime, like theft of identity, as opposed to someone walking up to you and going, give me a car and carjacking you? Like how I grew up with my children in the neighborhood where my house was shot at 3 different times. My son was shot in a home invasion with transversive 5 times, and my very dear friend, Svetlana Munch, was murdered. And her husband, the last time I checked, is still in Stillwater, thank God for what he did to her. Do you feel that your upbringing made you sheltered or more aware of the disparities?
Certainly sheltered, I think. And I think that was the surprise that I experienced. I think a lot of kids, especially that I work with now in the clinic, are dealing with exposure to a system much, at the age of 10, 11, 12, even before that. And whereas for me, I think there's certainly, I imagine, a level of white-collar crime, but there was also just no enforcement of it. I know for a fact that there were certainly drug offenses going on in the neighborhood, but especially with kids in high school, but yeah, the enforcement wasn't there and the exposure wasn't there. So I think it was more of a sheltered perspective. And then when I started working with them, mine was kind of where, and that's where these fellowships are really great, is that they give you a chance. I think they allow you to work with organizations that might not be able to hire someone on, but that can give exposure to areas that you're completely unfamiliar with. And I think once I saw it, it was something that I couldn't go back on it, or I couldn't walk away from. It was, and so yeah, sheltered, and it's also still, I think that sticks with me. My background is something that it's an effort every day to go in and sympathize and empathize with kids who have a completely different on both of our ends. And I think I spend sometimes an hour. It drives my supervisor nuts. Perry Moriarty, I don't know if it drives her nuts, but I spend a lot of time in traffic court, really just trying to get to know, trying to find a common ground where we can kind of move forward together and understand each other and my motivations and their motivations and where we come. So it just informs kind of a more active effort going forward.
Can I just
Sure.
real quick? What's the one thing you personally have done to prevent burnout? When you have passion, sometimes the effort's just there, and other times you're like, oh,
Yeah.
and what's the one thing that helps you get to that place when you have to, and you're just the ember?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love being around people. I tend to have probably a little bit too much optimism, but I also think that this is another place where my background helps, is that, if I burn out or if something goes catastrophically wrong, I can always land on my parents' couch, which is, would be not great. I love my parents, but I don't want to do that. But there's that kind of cushion there for me. And so I feel like, I can go into this thing that I feel really passionate about now, even though there's a possibility that it might not go exactly how I planned it, but yeah, I figure it's better to try and go into it full-heartedly than it is to back away from it. Yeah.
Thank you for letting me know that actually love is
Thank you. I saw Professor Nealon. Did you want to jump in?
No, thanks to everyone for coming. I was maybe going to reflect on some of the, two things to add to Amanda's remarks. One is just to kind of underscore the range of organizations that students have ended up working in. So the center has a long history and continual work of putting people in international organizations. And it's actually really unique for many centers. It's really hard for students to get access to those. They're privileged spaces. They're hard to get into. They're often in really expensive cities like Geneva and New York and Vienna and Paris. And they're competing with students from other schools for whom their resource base is much larger. And I think for our students to have a meaningful attempt to continue to, do global, regional, or local human rights careers, those kinds of access points are really central so they have a range of experiences. I think the other thing that has continued to define it is we end up supporting a lot of small grassroots organizations by putting students in organizations that actually have very little capacity and are struggling in a funding environment that's super hostile for small grassroots organizations. And we've been able to do that locally, but I think we've also been able to do that in other countries where, again, often for smaller organizations, having access to the kind of pathways that bring really educated, smart, engaged students who can actually help them do some really concrete things, even in the course of a couple of months, can be really transformative. And David's view was always, Amanda said this, you didn't have to be a human rights lawyer to be doing human rights. So that so many of our graduates and those who support us are doing human rights in a myriad of ways. They may not be working for the ACLU or for the UN, but they're doing human rights in all kinds of different ways. And they're bringing that sensibility of rights into whatever work they do, whether it's trusts in the states or corporate mergers or all of that. All of that work has to be done in a way. If we stay in our silos of human rights, we're not going to change the way the things that are structurally wrong with our world structured. So anyway, just a thought.
you. Anybody else want to jump in? I'll just say what Christian was reflecting on right now is definitely what we hear from our students. We have an incredible clinical program here at the law school where students are doing experiential education with supervisors, but I don't know that there's a comparison for working full-time under a great lawyer in the sense of learning the things that you can't learn in a classroom and how to have the sensibility to engage with people that have a very different background than you, that are in a crisis situation. That isn't something that lawyers learn in this classroom. I think that's very hard. And when we put students to work under great lawyers that have done this work for a long time, and they're seeing it day-to-day and probably making mistakes if I speak to my own experience, by the time they're leaving our law school, they have professional training and a skill set that isn't on the bar, but that is absolutely critical for being an effective and a humane and a just lawyer. And that's constantly, when students are writing their reports and reflecting about what they most took away, it's seeing that in themselves that they've grown in that way and admiring it in the attorneys that they're working under. And so I think the summers, using summers to be able to pick that up is a huge contribution to students' training. So Judge Lang, did you want to add anything?
I'd like to close with a story about Franklin Reed. And Franklin Reed was a human rights fellow. He went to Rwanda and worked under an international human rights lawyer to help recreate the juvenile justice system. One of the things I think many people realize is that part of the genocide was aimed at killing the lawyers and judges among the first people, in addition to the Tutsi population. So when the genocide ended and we had a peace, there was a decimation of the legal system. And so Franklin Reed worked under a human rights lawyer, and the only reason she was there was she was posted in Canada during the genocide, so she was not assassinated. But her mother was living in Rwanda, and she told the story of how the barrier was up and she could not rescue her mother. So she found her mother's body and told her family she was going to stay in Rwanda to try to help restore the country. So when Frank got there, this is about a decade after the genocide happened, he's coming from the law school and working, trying to build a juvenile system and look at the ad hoc post-violence system and how to make some corrections, how to make it accessible, how to make it fair. And so Frank, we had arranged housing for him from a Rwandan who was posted in St. Paul, worked at Land O'Lakes. And when Frank and Peter Brown arrived in Rwanda, the house was not vacant as it had been represented. So, but given the tenacity of Peter Brown and Frank, they said, well, even if it's not vacant, we're going to move in with the people who are living here, and we're going to fulfill our requirement, and we're going to stick and stay. So over the years after that experience, Frank became the head of the Minneapolis Human Rights Department. And now he is I believe, an administrative judge for Hennepin County, but it really shaped his career to have that experience.
I have to say two things. So Frank was my first boss. So in my 1L summer, I worked for Frank. And I love that, and I'm really influenced by this. I mean, we are generations of Minnesota alumni, and it's this network of past fellows and alumni more broadly that are everywhere. And so we're always telling students that part of the fellowship is not only this support and this endorsement, it is this like, you don't have a choice about it. You're now in this huge community of human rights fellows around the world. This cohort, and I have to tell a story about you, Rebecca. One is because I do think it attracts And it goes to the burnout question. This type of work, broadly speaking, attracts a certain type of personality. So it's a little bit self-selecting in terms of the students that appear at the doorstep looking for fellowship. And I remember when Rebecca was thinking about working with Doug, we had advertised the position, and I was trying to figure out, I think I'd been at the center for like a week. Can I send a student to see the awareness? Like what kind of violence levels do I need to research? Is the university going to approve this security code? So I told Rebecca, like, we have to figure this out. I don't know if I can send you. I'm university business. And Rebecca said, I am fine. I know martial arts. Oh, these students are going to kill me. But yeah, so I think about Frank and this kind of perseverance and attitude of kind of get it done and not being dissuaded by certain obstacles. That's brilliant. We're going to say something, Rebecca, before I throw you all of us.
As far as, I don't remember saying that, by the way. I do, yeah, but I don't remember saying it. I have all the recommendations for the white hygiens in DC. Well, there's only one, but anyway, I was at a conference just yesterday, strategic litigation under the TVPRA, for those who are practicing that. And as I was on my way out to go to the airport, I had like a University of Minnesota Law School luggage tag, and another woman from the conference who was in the elevator with me goes, "Oh, did you go to U of M Law? So did I." I said, "Oh wow, like what did you do there?" She goes, "Oh, I studied immigration. I was in the immigration clinic with Ben Casper." It's like, oh yeah, this it doesn't. You will be in the community and you hold in forever, which is great.
So true. And that is a lovely pitch, Rebecca. If you'd like to hear more about what Rebecca is doing now as a paid job, the special day really continues. We do have this room so we can stay and chat. I'd love to hear from folks, and we can talk to our panelists. We have 2 more events today. We have a panel at 2:45 that's focused on business and human rights, in which Rebecca will be sharing about her work in labor rights. And then at 4 o'clock is our keynote lecture reflecting on Professor Weisbrot's legacy in the area of corporate accountability and human rights. So I hope that if you're able, you'll stay with us. We have a reception afterward. I know Kathy Gorlin, I believe, is in transit. She's flying in tonight. So I know she wanted to be here and was cheering us on. And if I understood correctly, I think she couldn't handle that many days of cold. If I understood, I think that a whole weekend, she's here for a reunion weekend, if I understood correctly. Little did she know that we were going to have summer weather, but we're really indebted to Judge Lang, to Kathy, to all the class of 1978 members, to George's family. This has been a huge privilege and a huge impact. So I thank you all for coming today. A special thank you to Christian, to Rebecca, to Judge Lang, Sam, and Doug who got pulled in. Thanks, everybody. This was really a nice occasion to celebrate, and we look forward to chatting together. Thank you.